Come join me on my second channel, Jaguar Gator 8, where we'll talk all things college football. New video drops every Monday at 6 p.m. Eastern. Click the card in the upper right corner to watch the latest video. And now, on with our feature presentation. There are a lot of reports that come out around draft season that force players to rise and fall on big boards. But a lot of the time, these reports are based around something completely subjective. Whether you think it's true or not, it's a matter of opinion. As an example, a player is supposedly falling down boards because he has a poor work ethic and takes plays off. Now you might look at the tape and agree with that, or disagree with that, but that's a matter of opinion. It's very rare that a report comes out that is based off of a blatant lie that can easily be proven and can easily be verified. You're not going to see a report saying this quarterback is sliding down boards because he's only 5'10" and he's shorter than you want your quarterback to be. That's absurd, because you can easily check his height. Well, that wasn't always the case, because in 1993, an erroneous draft report came out that was a blatant lie. There was no retraction issued, there was no apology issued, and the player not only slid down draft boards, but lost millions of dollars in the process. This is Miami Dolphins running back Terry Kirby, and he was drafted by the team in the third round of the NFL draft. But he was projected to be a first-round pick, and was projected to make millions on his first steal. And it all fell apart because of a complete lie. This is the story behind what might be the worst false draft report in the history of the NFL. Before I talk about the report in question, we need some context to understand who the player was and how good he was, to the point where he was projected beforehand as one of the best running backs in the entire class. Virginia has sponsored football since 1887, back to when Grover Cleveland was the president in his first term. So the Cavaliers have been around for close to 135 years at this point. And in that stretch, only 21 people in program history have been good enough to have their jersey retired, or in essence, put into the Ring of Honor. Terry Kirby is one of those 21 players, because his time at Virginia was that good, and was a big reason why the Cavaliers had the success that they had. From 1990 to 92, Virginia went 23-11-1, which was one of the most successful stretches in program history. Remember that this was a team that, prior to 1984, had never even made it to a bowl game, and to start off in the 1990s, they were one of the better teams in college football. And a big reason for that was because of the dominant play of Terry Kirby. He didn't play a whole lot as a freshman in 1989, but in 1990, he began seeing playing time, as he split the reps in the backfield with Nicky Fisher. It was there that Kirby made his presence known, as during his sophomore season, he had 1,020 rushing yards, becoming the first sophomore in Virginia history to eclipse the 1,000-yard mark. Not only that, but he led the entire ACC in rushing yards, becoming just the fourth player in Virginia history to accomplish this feat, joining Fred Shepard from 1960, Frank Quayle from 1968, and most recently, Barry Word from 1985. He also did this on 6.2 yards per carry, which was the second best total in the conference amongst all qualified running backs, only behind his teammate, Nicky Fisher, who had 7. And his 1,344 yards from scrimmage ranked first in the ACC, as he joined those same 3 aforementioned players as the only players in school history to accomplish this feat. For an encore as a junior in 1991, Kirby followed it up with another fantastic season, picking up 887 rushing yards on 5.4 yards per carry, scoring 7 rushing touchdowns, just like he did in 1990, and finishing the season with 1,293 yards from scrimmage. Once again, his yards from scrimmage total led the entire ACC, as Kirby became the first player in school history to ever leave the conference in this category in back-to-back seasons, although Frank Quayle did this in non-consecutive seasons in 1966 and 1968. He showed off his ability as a dual threat in both the running and the passing game, as he finished the 1991 season 3rd in the conference in rushing yards, 4th in yards per attempt, and 6th in receptions, even leading the team in catches in both 1991 and 1992. Turns out, Kirby was a very good receiving back. He had pretty surefire hands, and he was great in the open field, rarely going down on first contact. During his sophomore and junior seasons, Kirby had 70 receptions combined. Keep that thought about being able to catch the ball in the back of your mind, because it's going to make what happens later in the story a bit weird, and that's putting it lightly. Kirby came back for his senior season in 1992, and even though he only played in 8 games, he put up the best numbers of his career in just about every major statistical category. He finished the season with a career-high 1,130 rushing yards, which ranked 3rd in the ACC. He averaged a whopping 6.5 yards per carry, which led the entire conference in that category. In fact, he was so efficient that by the time he graduated, his career average was 5.9 yards per carry, which amongst all qualified running backs was the all-time record for career yards per carry in ACC history. Roughly 30 years later, he's in 12th place, having been overtaken by guys like Travis Etienne, Warwick Dunn, and Dalvin Cook. But back in 1992, he was in first place. And he finished the season with a career-high 1,371 yards from scrimmage, which ranks second in the ACC, trailing Randy Cuthbert of Duke by 5 yards. If Kirby got just 5 more yards, he would have been the first and to date the only player in ACC history to lead the conference in this category 3 times. And I would be here all day if I listed every single record that Kirby held in Virginia history, because there's a reason that his jersey is retired by the school. However, here are some of the highlights. By the time he graduated, his 3,348 rushing yards ranked first in school history. Today, he's in 3rd place behind Thomas Jones and Tiki Barber, which is pretty good company to be in. His 1,130 rushing yards during the 1992 season was the 4th most in school history, and it helped that during that season, in a game against Duke, he had 207 rushing yards, which was one of the top 10 single-game totals in school history at the time. He had 14 games with at least 100 rushing yards, which was 2nd most in school history at the time, only behind John Pappitt, who had 15 between 1948 and 1950. And he finished his career with 4,637 all-purpose yards, which ranks 2nd in school history, only behind Frank Quayle. Back in 1992, you could legitimately make the argument that Terry Kirby was the best running back in the over century-long history of the Virginia football program. And honestly, I'm not sure you get too many people strongly disagreeing with you. The man was that good. Now, it was time to see what he could do in the NFL, and especially after a great performance in the East-West Shrine game, where he had 2 rushing touchdowns, his draft stock was through the roof. Many draft experts had him pegged as a first-round pick, as even though Georgia running back Harrison Hurst was a consensus number 1 running back, a lot of people had Kirby as the number 2 or the number 3 guy. The bottom line was that Kirby was going to go early, and he was going to get paid. He was going to realize his NFL dream. Except that by the time the draft hit, he had slid down everyone's board, and he wouldn't go until all the way down to pick number 78, where the Miami Dolphins took him and made him the 9th running back taken. So what happened? Well, as it turned out, Kirby had a major problem with his vision, because apparently, Terry Kirby was blind. The Dolphins were thrilled to get Kirby in the 3rd round, and understandably so. They desperately needed a running back, as the running game was pretty dire. In 1992, the Dolphins ranked 24th in rushing yards out of 28 teams, and 20th in yards per carry. Only one player on the team, Mark Higgs, had more than 1 rushing touchdown, as he only averaged 3.6 yards per carry despite being the lead back. As a side note, to learn more about the career of Mark Higgs and how he was the victim of identity theft that wound up derailing his career, click the card in the upper right corner. And Bobby Humphrey, while incredibly talented, as evidenced by his time in Denver back in 1989 and 1990, was a complete wild card, and wasn't exactly the most dependable guy. The Dolphins felt that by getting Terry Kirby, that they got a first-round talent in the 3rd round, and that he would be competing for the starting job. Head coach Don Shula said that Kirby was going to compete for the starting spot, and offensive coordinator Gary Stevens echoed those thoughts, saying on the Virginia running back, "I don't think Higgs is the guy who can carry you to the Super Bowl. I don't know if Kirby is going to be the Emmitt Smith or Thurman Thomas you'd like to have, but it looks like he has a chance to come in and help the club." And ESPN draft analyst Mel Kiper Jr. loved the pick, saying that the Dolphins got an absolute steal, and saying that Kirby would be a superlative back in the NFL. So what gives? If the numbers are there, if the production is there, if the tape is there, if everyone seems to love the guy, and if the guy has no red flags off the field that we know of from a legal or a work ethic standpoint, then why did he last that long? It was entirely because of one draft report put out by the famed draft analyst Joel Buchsbaum. Because in that report, Buchsbaum scared just about every team in the league by saying that Kirby was legally blind in his right eye, meaning that his vision was 2200 or less. And it didn't help that Kirby didn't wear corrective lenses, so he couldn't see the ball. Obviously, that's going to raise a ton of red flags to have a player that can't see. Buchsbaum was told the report by a Virginia coach, although he never revealed what coach said it, as he said that the information was confidential. Now, Virginia running backs coach Ken Mack said that this report was insane, saying, "You've got to be kidding me. That's ridiculous. It's never been a problem and never came up." And Kirby's agent, Joe Sroba, said on the reports, "I call it paralysis by analysis. People were scared of words that they heard, and it's upsetting because I feel like that's what led him to be passed up." Everyone believed the report that Kirby was blind, and even though Mack tried to defend it, it's not like Virginia did anything to earn the benefit of the doubt. Remember that 2 years before, at the 1991 NFL Draft, the Lions chose Virginia wideout Herman Moore. Obviously, that turned out to be an incredible pick, as Moore is probably the second greatest receiver in Lions history today, and he led the league in receptions twice while making 4 Pro Bowls and while being named the first team All-Pro 3 times. He looked abysmal, and looked like he had never played the sport before. And that was because, as it turns out, he was blind. Now, he was able to overcome this in college because the balls had white stripes on them, but in the NFL, because the balls did not have those, he had no sense of perception. It was only after he got his vision checked out did everything change. If you want to learn more about that, click the card in the upper right corner. If Kirby went to literally any other school, then maybe he could have overcome this report. But because he went to the one school that had a team get burned by this 2 years before, in an incident that was still fresh in people's minds, once that report came out, it was game over. When the Goo Goo Dolls sang "Why Don't You Slide," they were referring to Terry Kirby's draft stock after this report. And Don Shula had no idea that Kirby was blind when they drafted him, to the point where after he found out this information from a reporter in the post-draft press conference, he asked his personnel chief, "Did we just draft a blind guy?" And Don Shula had history with blind players. Bob Greasy had arguably his worst season ever in 1976 when his vision deteriorated to the point where he was blind, and his poor play gave Shula his first losing season ever as a head coach. That's why Greasy wore glasses the following year. To learn more about that, click the card in the upper right corner. So that explains the slide. Terry Kirby was legally blind in his right eye. There's just one small problem. There's one teeny tiny problem that we have to talk about with this. None of what I just said was true. Yep, you heard that right. The report by Joel Buchsbaum? It was a complete lie. Kirby wasn't actually blind. Now, it was true that the vision in his right eye was not as strong as the vision in his left eye, but he was nowhere close to blind. Whereas he had 20/20 vision in his left eye, he had 20/40 vision in his right eye. That's still more than fine to the point where you don't need glasses or contacts or anything like that. And it's definitely not the same thing as being legally blind. And Kirby's had this eyesight problem since he was born, saying, "I've had this problem since I was a little kid. It's just something I was born with." And he's never had a problem with his eyesight before, which explains why he was such a good receiver in college and could still catch the ball even if it came on his right side. And to go even further, Miami's doctors confirmed that Kirby was not blind in his right eye. Whoops. So that report was a complete lie. And while it might seem funny to members of the Dolphins front office, as Tom Bratz, the director of college scouting, jokingly said at a press conference that he would be back with his white stick, and jokingly said on the team's 4th round pick, Colorado cornerback Ronnie Bradford, that he has 20/20 vision, he also has both ears, there was one person that wasn't laughing at this. That person, as you might have guessed, was Terry Kirby. Because this false report that was the sole reason for his draft slide cost him a ton, and I mean a ton of money in the end. Kirby was projected as a 1st round pick before the report. At worst, he would be an early 2nd round pick. Just about everyone had him as one of the top 3 running backs in the class. And again, besides Garrison Hurst, Kirby was seen by some as the best halfback there was, even above Jerome Bettis. Back in 1993, 1st round picks averaged $769,000 per year. 3rd round picks averaged $214,000 per year. This means that because of the slide, Terry Kirby lost over $555,000 per year. And that meant that over the course of a 4-year contract, Kirby lost $2.2 million. If we adjust for inflation, he was set to make $1.53 million per year as a 1st round pick, and around $426,000 as a 3rd round pick. Meaning that if this happened today, he would have lost out on $4.4 million. All because of a completely fake report that said he was legally blind when he was not. That one report was enough to scare off tons of teams. And while one person in Kirby's camp said that he wanted answers as to why the report came out, saying, "There's nothing lacking in eye production, and all you have to do is look at the game film," they never got answers. And I dug high and low, and unless I missed something, or it's not available online, Buchsbaum never issued an apology or retraction for the false report that cost Kirby millions of dollars. As for how Kirby did in the NFL, well, he went on to have a very solid career, becoming a dual threat in the running and receiving game just like he was at Virginia. He truly was a 1st round talent drafted in the 3rd round. He had a ton of trouble catching the football. In fact, he had so much trouble catching the ball that he was targeted 95 times in his 1st season. He finished his career catching over 77% of the passes thrown his way, and finished his career with 333 receptions for 3,222 yards and 12 receiving touchdowns. Yeah, that's some trouble, alright. Add on 2,875 rushing yards and 27 rushing touchdowns, and by the time Kirby's career came to an end, he found the end zone 39 times and had over 6,000 yards from scrimmage. Kirby played his first 3 seasons in Miami, before going to San Francisco for 3 years, before going to Cleveland for their quasi-inaugural season in 1999, before finishing with 3 years in Oakland. When a running back can play in the NFL for 10 years and gets drafted in 1993, but only exits the game after 2002, and that was only because of a broken ankle that forced him to get carted off the field and get put in an air cast, that's really good, especially since he finished inside the top 10 of the NFL in yards per touch 3 times, and since he had over 1,000 yards from scrimmage in 2 of his first 3 seasons with the Dolphins. But even though his career turned out alright at the end of the day, the way it started out, where he lost millions of dollars because of a complete lie, was awful. And it's not like this was a ploy by the Dolphins to get him to slide down the board like some teams do. Again, Shula had no idea that Kirby was supposedly blind, and the report was published by an unaffiliated draft expert who had connections with a Virginia coach. So it's not like the NFL did him dirty here. Lying hurts people. And in this case, this lie impacted Terry Kirby not just in his heart and in his feelings, but in his wallet as well. Get your official Jaguar Gator 9 merchandise by going to jg9shop.com, and be sure to like this video, ring the notification bell, and subscribe down below if you haven't already, as it helps the channel out a lot. And be sure to check out Twitch every Wednesday night at 9 p.m. Eastern for your chance to play NFL trivia and win cash prizes. Link in the description below. If you want to see videos like this condensed down to 60 seconds, then follow me on TikTok at Jaguar Gator 9. To see college football videos, subscribe to Jaguar Gator 8. To see highlight videos of players throughout the history of the NFL, subscribe to JG9 Highlights. Also, special thanks to all of our Patreon supporters for helping out the channel. Your support is greatly appreciated. See how you can become a patron and request future video topics in the description below.